very good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this fireside chat where for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to have my esteemed boss here, Matt Garman, and we'll have a bit of a dialogue and a conversation across several topics, several perspectives that I think leaders here in the room would love to hear about. Come January 1, even though the title says VP of Global Services, come January 1, I will lead AWS Industries globally. And part of that responsibility will also include the decision on where we build new data centers and infrastructure regions, as well as everything around sovereignty. So I will dive into some of these topics with Matt here as we go into that discussion. So Matt, pleasure to have you here with us. So Matt, first of all, I want to start at the macro level. You know, a lot of political dynamics going on in the world today, tariffs, trade discussions, but even more importantly, discussions around sovereignty, digital residency. And when we think about all of these dynamics that are at play here, from an AWS perspective, as CEO of AWS, what comes to your mind and how do you see this as an opportunity or something that we can overcome as an organization?
Yeah, I really do see it as an opportunity. I see that as an extension of things that we're able to take on for customers. Today, many of you all run global businesses, and if you have to think about how you handle data sovereignty, how you think about localization, how you think about operating in different locations and changing regulations out there, and by the way, they are changing pretty rapidly. If you had to do that not in a cloud world, it's like borderline impossible, right? You'd be out there procuring colo space left and right. You'd be having to switch. You'd have to be in the cloud. One of the reasons you can be in the cloud is to easily adjust to a changing landscape. It is one of the benefits you get, that agility. And I think business agility is one of the things that it's one of the defining characteristics of a successful business today. It's, can you adjust to the changing landscape, whether it's customer dynamics, government dynamics, other geopolitical changes. And if you can change, that's kind of our job, is to help you with that. If you can need to have local infrastructure, you can launch in another region where we have infrastructure. If you have regulations that you need to hit, you can lean on our team to help you hit those regulations. If there are details that you need to change around managing tracking of data, we can help and make it easier to track that data. And so the more you can get into a cloud world, it doesn't make these problems go away. Like, these are hard, right? As business leaders, I'm not suggesting you're like, great, all right, I'm out. I don't have to worry about any of those problems anymore. But we can help with that. And just like we help with infrastructure, I think that there are opportunities for us to help around data sovereignty.
No, very good. And probably I'll ask you to dive deeper into the European sovereign cloud.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. I meant to bring that up. Quite excited about what we're going to be launching here in just a couple of weeks, which is the European Sovereign Cloud. And so, stepping back, there's been a lot of push in the EU for a sovereign solution for both governments to use as well as regulated industries. But I will tell you, if you people ask me, like, what is your solution to sovereignty? Like, there is no one solution. It turns out every country has a different view. Every region has a different view. Every kind of person that you talk to, even inside of those places, have different views. And so when Europe said, hey, we need to have a cloud solution that's, protects our data sovereignty, what we did is not unlike what we do at AWS a lot. We tried to start with the customer first. We went to those governments and we said, what are you trying to accomplish? Actually, we went really deep with the BSI in Germany, and as in one particular organization that was particularly helpful in really diving deep. And we were like, what are you trying to accomplish? Because if it's protectionism, right, you're just trying to try to prop up a European cloud that doesn't really exist for whatever it's worth. That's, we don't have a solution for that, and good luck to you. But if you have real concerns, which they did, by the way, right? And when you get down to it, most of these government agencies are actually quite rational. And they say, look, I need to be able to protect these workloads, that if the United States government comes to you and says, I'm going to throw you in prison if you don't turn over this data or shut off this workload, like, how do I know you won't do it? And so I was like, well, that's a good question. Like, how? And so we work. That's a problem we can work with. And so we built the European Sovereign Cloud with this idea that to try to build in as many of those protections as possible, where It's entirely housed inside of Europe, right? So even the authentication stack, even your credentials, everything will be in Europe, right? So if your regular AWS credentials that you use globally won't work in this region, you have to create a new one. It's a different partition. So everything stays there locally. So if there's a fiber cut, there's no issue globally around the world for a really long time, right? Because these countries have to think about war scenarios and things like that. All data centers and everything there is operated by EU citizens. It's actually, we built the whole, put that whole region actually in a wholly owned subsidiary that has an independent governing board that when they get kind of lawful requests, they can choose to say if that follows EU laws or not just US laws or other place laws.
Yep.
And so we built a ton of protections in place such that we've had now many of these regulations in countries, actually the vast majority of them in Europe, have come to say, great, yep, that's actually the solution we want, and that's the model that we want going forward. Really excited about that. We have a number of global partners. Many of them are here this week, launching with us, and we're quite excited about that.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. I'll switch to the next one since we talked about regions infrastructure investment. 125 billion in capex. We see a lot of speculative investments in data centers around the world and even in the US. There is the talk about the AI bubble. From that perspective, what would your response be?
Well, so number one is yes. Turns out running a cloud infrastructure is capital intensive. As we grow faster, we spend more capital on it. So it's that's kind of for us to do so that you don't have to. So the capex required to kind of build these data centers, to build AI servers, to acquire all the power and land is a lot, but it's a good business for us. And obviously that's kind of the business that we are in. One of the things that's going around a lot is this thing about people concerned that AI is a bubble. I'm actually curious. We have a lot of really great business leaders in here. How many of you either today already believe it or think that within the next 6 months, show of hands, how many of you think that you have a path to positive ROI for your AWS or for your AI investments over the next kind of 6 months or so, if not already today? To me, that is a lot of value that you're not going to stop getting. Right? That is a lot of people. Like that's fully 2/3 of this room already are getting positive returns or have a path to win 6 months. You're not going to just turn that off. You're going to be like, ooh, I loved those returns that I'm getting. I don't want to get them anymore.
Yep.
And the potential is only going to go up for better returns on that. And so to me, for us, where you all are our customers, that bubble is, I think, I'm not particularly worried about that at all. I think all of us are going to be using way more AI a year, 2 years, 3 years from now than we're using today, for sure. Just the value is too much. Now, if you talk about billion-dollar startups that haven't written a line of code, maybe. Like there may be bubbles there, and that's different. Sorry if there's any of you in the audience, maybe you're different. but that bubble could exist, but I think from the overall point of view, there's just way too much value there.
No, very good. And silicon, 1 million Trainium chips deployed so far, and
yeah,
it'll be interesting for the audience to hear your point of view. We've got NVIDIA GPUs, we've got Trainium. How did that decision come about to build our own chips, and how does that change the economics then for our customers as you think moving forward?
Yeah, well, if you allow me to take a half a step back, AWS has been building custom silicon for over 10 years now. It started with our own Nitro chips, which allowed us to virtualize all of our networking and storage and compute into a much more secure environment, a much more cost-performant environment, a much more high-performance environment. And Nitro has been such a rousing, like a huge success for us, and it is part of the reason why I think many of you trust AWS and build your businesses on AWS today. And it's why we've been able to innovate at such a rapid rate around some of our infrastructure. We then took that and said, you know what, we think that we can take what we've learned there and build a general purpose compute chip. And that's when we launched Graviton. And now for 3 years in a row, we've launched more Graviton processors inside of AWS than any other processor. Right. And so more than 50% actually is Graviton today of what we land in AWS for the last 3 years in a row. So huge success. It means, by the way, there's still a huge chunk of that that's Intel and AMD and other processors, but We delivered really differentiated cost performance benefits with Graviton. If any of you are not using Graviton yet, you get a 20% absolute performance gain from Graviton compared to x86 at 20% lower pricing. It is such a no-brainer. And so what we learned is that when we can increase performance, because we know the exact environment our chips are going into, we know exactly what our customers are looking for, and we know how we can drive cost out of that equation, it's a win for everybody. So we did that with general purpose compute. And about 5 years ago, we saw that more and more workloads were moving to AI. And we said, okay, this is by far a more complicated chip for us to go build, but we think that we can do it. And we knew this one was going to take us a little bit longer to really start to ramp up. Trainium 1 was a good first chip, but it was kind of a learning chip, as was Graviton 1. It's kind of one of these things where you have to kind of work some of the kinks out. Trainium. And so Trainium 2, but we knew that, or we had but we had good data that more and more compute was going to need accelerated compute and was going to be in the AI space. And we saw the benefits that we gave with Graviton, and we said, if we can do the same in the AI space, we're going to be in a good spot. Now, this was before generative AI completely exploded, and kind of now it's an obvious thing to say. But fortunately, we were already well down that path. And so with Trainium 2 was really what I would consider our first real high-powered AI chip that was kind of at the leading edge of performance and significantly better for some workloads on price performance. And it's been fantastic. I'll say when we launched Trainium 2, the biggest efficiency was the software ecosystem around it, where NVIDIA's spent the last 20 years building up their CUDA ecosystem and the software around it. And so we've been running really fast over the last couple of years to get the software ecosystem around Trainium to be great. And that's part of why I'm incredibly excited for Trainium 3. Trainium 2, honestly, was a fantastic chip that kind of took an expert team to use, right? And so we partnered deeply with Anthropic. We partnered deeply with a couple of other big AI labs. We partnered deeply internally on our own teams. But it took kind of experts. You had to do kernel programming and other to get the performance where you needed to. The software stack has now evolved where you can actually just write to libraries to get it to work, and that's a much better place. And so I'm very excited on Trainium 3. I think that we're going to see a lot more people being able to use it and take advantage of those performance benefits. Lots of people, by the way, get to take advantage of the performance benefits of Trainium today because it powers Bedrock, because we could do the hard work under the covers to optimize the models. And so you get better price performance when you run some of the models on Trainium through Bedrock, where over 50% of the traffic is already running there. But I really think Trainium 3 is going to be a game changer. And what I'm seeing with Trainium 4, I think Trainium has the potential to lead in absolute performance for the next couple of years, forget price performance.
And it's very interesting. I've had some customers, especially in the oil and gas sector, deep high performance computing, who are super excited about Trainium and saying they can even optimize their code now that they understand the roadmaps of the successive Trainium versions that are coming out. So a lot of that collaboration is going to be very key.
That's interesting. I would think they would need FP64 specificity, but which we don't have in some of the training checks. But I'll go talk.
We'll go in that.
For traditional HPC, it's an interesting use case. So it's
very good. Matt, let me switch to data. In your keynote, you talked about the importance of data. And as we think through this agentic world and what we're driving here, the data corpus becomes the key aspect of what we're trying to drive here.
Yeah.
So talk a bit about that, and probably for the benefit of the audience here,
sure,
share your perspective.
Yeah. I had a funny, I'll share. I was talking to some analysts a little earlier today because we have the analyst summit across the street. And one of them was saying like, hey, you know what? We love that you guys are talking about all this AI and other things like that. But do you really think that they're saying like, when I talk to customers, like, I don't know if all of them are going to be ready like right away to adopt agentic and agent and whatever. And I was like, no, they're not. If customers don't get their data to the cloud first as a first step, they are not going to get the value out of AI or agents or whatever. So it's like, if they're not at that, it's kind of like you have to pause and you'd be like, whoa, sorry. If we're talking about how you're transforming with AI and you haven't moved any of your data to the cloud yet, we have to like pause that discussion, put it on hold or do a sidebar and go figure out how we help you modernize and get your data to the cloud really rapidly. And you can do some of these in parallel, by the way. So you don't have to be serial, But if you don't go do that, if right now you're like, I have no cloud footprint, everything is on-prem, but I'm hoping to transform with AI, you're probably not going to. Like you're just like, it probably isn't, because you're not going to have differentiated abilities. You're not going to be able to tie agents deeply into your data and your workloads. And I'm not saying you're not going to be able to get any, but you're going to get significantly less value from that. And so that data is incredibly important. Getting your applications moved to the cloud, your data moved to the cloud. By the way, not just your applications moved, but also modernized is a key step too. Because if your applications are both moved and modernized, that's when you really start to see the huge impact. And so as leaders, you can't get distracted by the overly excited shiny object and forget to do the baseline level of work. You've got to get those workloads and the key ones. And by the way, I understand it'll take a while if you haven't done it. Think about what those strategic ones are. Think about the ones that are going to make the biggest impact, because you can do these things in parallel. I'm actually not suggesting you stop investing in your AI workflows. But if you haven't done the investment on getting the cloud landscape put together, you just won't get the value out of it.
Absolutely. And, in the last 4 years and the transformation work we've done with me leading professional services and helping customers in that migration and modernization, working with partners, this has been a key discussion we've been having with them. But agentic AI or Gen AI has even made it more imperative for us to make that move with customers.
Yeah. And it's like, just think about it this way. If you're not getting your data such that it can be ingested and acted upon by these AI systems, then you're just implementing generic technology. You might do it in a cool and interesting or somewhat novel way, but if it's really not specific to the workflows of your company or your specific data and your specific customers, you're just not going to get the value.
Absolutely. That's good. Let me connect the dots to Nova Forge, where you're completely looking to transform the way customers can build their own foundational model at a much lower price point. So love to hear your perspective on this and what you think this future holds for us, or the future holds for us from this perspective.
Sure. And let me, I'll talk a little bit about how we got to Nova Forge. Hopefully some of you heard this from the keynote, but if not, I'll do a quick outline of what it is. But what I saw and what the team saw is that as we were talking to customers over the last kind of year and a half, we kept hearing over and over people saying, you know what, I think I'm going to build my own model. And we're like, okay, well, it's expensive. It's hard. Like building your own model is tricky, particularly if you need to get kind of frontier scale, but say more about why. And they would say, well, because the existing model doesn't really understand my business. Like I have a bunch of proprietary data, and I think I can do a better job of building a model that understands my business. And I'll use Amazon as an example. Okay. We have no surprise, we have a lot of really good retail data. Okay. The generic models don't have that level of retail data, right? We have click-through data. We have what buys, what products, or how you think about products, whatever, et cetera. Lots of really good retail data. And so we were going to go build Rufus, which is the Amazon shopping assistant that gives you suggestions about what to buy and things like that. And they tested generic models, and they didn't do a good job because they didn't understand our products. They didn't understand our ASINs. They didn't understand the relationships between those two things or how people wanted. And so they built their own model, right? And they're a scrappy team. And they had we obviously have some very talented engineers internally, and they built their own model. It was expensive, by the way. They used, millions of dollars worth of GPUs and took a long time. And where they struggled was because they still didn't build a frontier model, right? They struggled because their model did a much better job of understanding retail data and retail shopping patterns, and wasn't as good at the core logic and reasoning as the frontier models. And they're like, I wish I could have like the great reasoning of Anthropic's Claude and have it know my data.
Yeah.
Or they're like, internally to our own teams, they're like, we love your Nova models, but like we really want it to know shopping, but I don't want to put that into the Nova models because then everybody has my shopping data. And sorry for you retailers out there, but Amazon's like, I want that proprietary to me, right? I don't want that to be out there for everybody. And it was a story we heard over and over again. We talked to banks, they would say the same thing, and insurance folks, they'd say the same thing, and healthcare companies would say the same thing. And they were all thinking about how to get to how do you have this problem where I can't spend $1 billion and go build a frontier model with all my data in it, and tuning and reinforcement learning only goes so far, and I can't quite get that model. And so the idea of Nova Forge was born from that, which is, well, we're training a frontier model. Amazon has the resources to go do this. If we're gonna go spend a couple $1 billion or however much it is to go build a frontier model in Nova, and Nova 2 is fantastic, by the way. Like you should look at some of the benchmarks and go play with it. I encourage you to. It is just as performant as many of the other and the other leading models out there on many of the benchmarks, at a much better price performance number, which is fantastic. And so we've got this now. We have a frontier model that gives you great performance. It gives you great reasoning. It gives you great tool use. It gives you good agentic capabilities. It gives you good ability to code. And what we said is, how about instead of, and we're kind of brainstorming. We're like, okay, how about if we do open weights? And we're like, well, the problem with open weights is it's okay, but you still can only customize so much. You really want to be in the pre-training stages so that you really have it, understand it from the early stages of training the model. And so then we thought this, okay, what if we give people a checkpoint and then let them train from there?
Yep.
The problem is you still need Amazon data to finish that training, right? If you start at a 70% checkpoint, you still need our data that we use for that last 30% to finish all the reasoning pieces. And then this is when we eventually got to this place where we said we could come up with this curated data set to finish the training, put it behind an API. So you can't, because we don't have license access to give you the data, but we can let you use the data. And so you can have access to this data. You can inject your own data in there, mix it together, and finish training the model. And now you have a frontier model that understands your company, your data, your domain, right? If you're in a specialized domain that is not covered by a generic model, you can feed that data. I was just talking to someone yesterday that focusing on computational biology. And like, most models don't understand computational biology because that's just not what the generic models are trained on. They want to feed that in there so that it does, and then the resulting model they can actually do reinforcement learning on and get much better results. I actually think this is going to be transformative to a number of your businesses. As I talk to customers and many of you out there, I can see a world where most companies are going to want their own trained version of their model. Even then, after you distill it later, after you do reinforcement learning, the model actually turns out that if you've inserted your data early on, it responds better to the reinforcement learning you do. It responds better to the fine tuning you do because it kind of knows your domain already. And so it actually gets smarter already. It's kind of like, teaching it physics when you've already taught it calculus. Like if you haven't taught it calculus first, the physics doesn't really work. It's like directionally, I don't know if that's a perfect analogy, but directionally it's like that kind of thing. And so the models actually learn the things that you want them to better because you've done it at the beginning. So we're quite excited about it. I actually think many of you are going to want to do this. And by the way, we have some teams that are ready to help jump in. And if you don't have a team that knows how to kind of mix data and think through things like that, we're happy to jump in and help you. But it's an area we're quite excited about.
No, I think this is absolutely exciting, Matt. And really it talks about AWS's leadership here, starting from the cloud and coming into this space and doing something that is really game changing.
Yeah. And I think here's one other thing that you all can think about, which is this actually allows you to build IP, right? You're no longer building like a wrapper around a generic model that are off the shelf model. Not generic, they're quite good. So I don't mean to minimize what they have. But if you're just building a wrapper around that, you're building the same thing everyone else can do. If you can build IP by getting a custom model through Nova Forge, you now have a differentiable thing that you're starting from that none of your competitors can actually start from. And I think it's going to allow you to build differentiated experiences out there too.
Absolutely, yeah. Matt, let me talk about frontier agents in the discussion there. So we talked about the Kiro autonomous agents, DevOps agents, security agents. A lot of customers are working on pilots now and looking at moving into production. Love to hear from you how all these pieces need to come together to drive value for our customers, and at what point should they really lean in and dive in, and how you see this forward there.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm sure all at this point you may already all be sick of hearing about agents and agentic workflows. So that may be true, but I really do believe that it is going to be transformative for the value you can get out of your AI investments. It really is. Being able to go and get work done is just such a bigger market opportunity for you all than content creation and summarization, which, by the way, is also great. That's not zero, but it's just a smaller slice of what everyone does. If you can actually go into your own line of business and build agents that can accomplish what you want to do, It's really meaningful. And it turns out one of the big areas that a lot of people do is in software development. And so and it's an area that we obviously have a lot of expertise in. And so I do think the first round of these 3 frontier agents that we launched are going to help us completely redefine how the software development lifecycle works. And it is going to be it's going to be change, right? It is. I think there's organizational change that you all are going to have to think about. As an example of that, your typical structure today for a software team is probably you have a dev manager. That dev manager probably manages 6 to 8, maybe 10 SDs, maybe a program manager, project manager, product manager. That's the team, right? And you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of those, and they go up to a senior manager and whatever. Like that's most likely the organizational structure that most of your technology teams have. I don't know that that's the technologies. I don't know that that's the org structure that you're going to have a year from now, as an example. I have seen, and we're seeing this naturally occur inside of Amazon, where the role of the dev manager actually becomes more a tech lead and more like a lead in the group, but they're also coding. And so you take that dev manager and 5 SDs and instead make it kind of 6 SDs that are all kind of working on this product together. And the SDEs are less about writing code and they're more about directing agents and thinking about systems and putting the systems together, and producing products, right?
Yes.
And all the roles are getting a little fuzzier, right? You have my expertise. You have the product manager. The product manager is not sitting there like totally just sketching things out anymore. They may be actually working on AI systems to build working prototypes of how they want things to work and collaborating with the team there. And so these jobs are kind of getting murky, where if you have these pods of people, there are 5, 6 people that can go and deliver incredible results. By the way, if they're delivering now what used to take, again, 30, 50 people teams to go deliver, you can have a team of 5 or 6 doing this. You can imagine an org structure where you have a couple of these pods. And by the way, I actually don't know this is the org structure. You can imagine there's 5 or 6 pods and then eventually a people manager. But the person manager might manage 30 or 40 people or whatever, or 50 people in just 5 or 10 of these little pods. And thinking about where those teams can really run fast and innovate independently. And there may be a blurring of lines between the classic project manager, product manager,
Absolutely.
and SDs, because some of those things. Now, you're still going to have areas of expertise, right? You're going to have people who are naturally think about system architecture and people who naturally think more about the customer experience. And so there will be still areas of expertise, but I think that is one of the areas that you all can start thinking about and should start thinking about as these frontier agents start to enter your organization, and how work gets done changes.
Very good. And still staying on that point, I've in speaking to some enterprise customers and CEOs, there's always that push and pull between, am I doing this to cut cost, or am I doing this to drive productivity and do more with the same number of people?
Mm-hmm.
And where do you find, how do you balance that tension then, Matt, in your mind?
Yeah. It's a good question. There's a couple ways that I would answer this. Number one is I would first the answer is probably it depends. Just to be super clear, I don't think there is one specific answer. There are some areas where it's very clear. I think if you have an area of your business where there is no more incremental work and you're able to optimize some of it, that's just cost savings. And so take customer service as an example. If you're able to automate half of your customer service calls, you're unlikely to go create twice as many customer service calls unless your business is growing, which is fantastic. But it's like it's great. Like those are just savings, straight up savings, because you're not creating more customer. Now, software development, if you have your software developers that create code twice as fast, you could create twice as many products. Like that could be awesome, right? That is positive. And so now you may decide, I don't want to create products twice as fast. I want to create products, get the math wrong, 1.8 times as fast and have 10% cost savings. Maybe, right? Like that, that's kind of your decision. And some of that may be industry specific. Some of that is like how much business is there to go win versus you're kind of in a more static business where there's not a lot of growth, and it's more incremental. It kind of is very industry and business specific that you've got to kind of make those different trade-offs, but you have those levers to make. And I personally am quite excited when you can find opportunities where you get to do twice as much, grow your business twice as much. Those are some of the most exciting ones, but there will be some where you can just cut costs. I think the other piece to think about too is to not be overly constrained on what part of your organization is getting transformed. I think we talked a lot this week and here, and it's natural. We're at a tech conference. You talk about your software developers and other areas like that. But we and briefly in my talk yesterday, I mentioned Amazon Quick. There's things like that are unbelievable unlocks for your broad corporate organization, where you can roll out something like Quick, connect it into your sources of data, which is relatively easy to do, overlaid with permissions, right? So everybody can only access their kind of individual AI systems can only access the permissions they want. And it unlocks people who are just kind of, I think that today, my guess is that many of you have people inside of your companies who are not leaning into AI for their day-to-day work because they're not sure what's safe, right? They're not sure if they're allowed to use this AI. They're not sure if what data they can put in it or not put in it. And the systems aren't necessarily connected to it anyway, so it's hard. If you just Quick is one of these things that just makes it easy. It's all secure. It's all locked down. You can connect it to all your sources of data. It's part of your AWS permissions and your corporate permissions. And you can now unlock all of your broad set of employees, whether they're marketers, whether they're legal, whether they're finance. We see finance teams building stuff. We had one of our product managers built an agent. So we have a doc writing culture at Amazon. One of our product managers wrote an agent where it fed it all of our pricing docs for new services, new launches, and things like that. And they taught it what's a good doc and a bad doc. And we changed the iteration from kind of reviewing pricing for new launches. Used to take us 4 or 5 times. We'd look at it and be like, hey, have you thought about this? What about this? Whatever. We now have an agent that basically is a coach and is like, you got to think about this. You got to think about this. You got to about this. By the time we come to the meeting, it's like an actual like awesome document where we can actually debate like, what do we want to do? And not like, oh, we don't have the data there. And we've cut iterations from having to do 3 or 4 or 5 meetings because we didn't have the right data down to 1 almost every single time. It's been fantastic. And they feel more empowered because our product managers don't have to be like, oh, crap, I didn't know that or whatever. And this was something that took no software developers, and they just did it. Somebody just did this. And so when you can unlock your organization to do things like that, it really is powerful. And so I encourage you all to check that out too. I think Amazon Quick is really a huge unlock for the broad swath of your organization.
Now, a fun fact there. We used that same model to do the pricing review we had with you.
Yes. And it's, by the way, it wasn't Uwem's team that wrote this. It's just like it goes like wildfire. You can share them, right? And so I can't remember which team it is, but they wrote it and they shared it around. And now all the product managers are like, holy crap, that thing's awesome. And then they're all sharing it and they're all using it and everybody in the company gets benefit from it.
And the 1-hour meeting was finished in 45 minutes and everybody was surprised that you said yes, that we could go ahead.
Yep, so exactly.
Came out very well. Matt, let me still stay on Quick Suite. You talk about companies and what they should do, but you also run a large organization also. And yes, you did give the example of the finance team and the treasury team building something.
Yeah.
But how do you, your advice to leaders here in the room, how do you drive that cultural transformation to make sure people are really adopting this and getting them moving? Despite the fears they may have.
Yeah, look, I do think that some of this is enabling. Like I have this analogy that I like to use, which is, let's say that you have a giant canyon that you need to cross and you lay a board across it, okay? And it's like 1,000-foot drop to the bottom and you need to walk across the board, okay? You walk super slow. Like you're like taking the steps, you're balancing, you're like, oh, yeah. Right? Now you take that exact same board and you put guardrails up on top of it, right? You can run across the board just fine, right? You handrails and you can just run across. You can run, right? It turns out that like that is how I think that like it's how you make people go fast is if you can give them something like Quick Suite where you say, don't worry. Like if you put the data you have in here is secure, right? Don't worry about how many of you have show of hands. How many of you have policies around? This is the data you can put in ChatGPT. This is the data you cannot put in ChatGPT. Show of hands. How many have like those restrictions you're coming to? Right. We have those for sure, right? Because I'm like, I don't want my proprietary data going there, it leaks into the model, they use it for other things, like whatever, right? You have to have those things. And so I would say even the things that are allowed, though, people are like not unsure. But if you can give them a platform like Quick Suite that's really, really powerful and connected to all your valuable data, that gives people permission to go and run fast. So that's number one, I think, is just one of those things where the more you can say, like, here's the safe, great, like blessed path, go fast and give you a bunch of tools, you'll find that the people will surprise you. At least that's what we found. So, I think that's number one. But I do think the other thing is, and I'll use another example that I used in the keynote. I used that example of that team that used to have, like that we thought was going to take um, 30 people, 18 months to build something, and they did it with a team of 6 people in 76 days.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful example, like, 'cause it is just so striking. And by the way, the part I didn't share in that was that when we first built that same service, it took a team of about 100 people about 2 years. And then these guys they rebuilt the thing. Now there were some learnings in there, but they rebuilt it in 76 days with 6 people. That's incredible, but it's such a powerful example. And so if you can find just those, and so by the way, we now have dozens, if not hundreds of teams replicating that inside of Amazon, because you have that powerful example where every single developer says, how do I get that? I'm not kidding. I have developers come up to me and be like, how do I get on that team? And be like, get on that team, like, but just do it on your own team. And they're like, okay, great. And they learn from that team. There's some like lunch and learns. You get the principal engineers and the in the company that are kind of learning from each other. And you see this flywheel start to, when you can find some real wins and some use cases that inspire the rest of your organization to go like, that is what I want. Then you make heroes of them internally, right? And you basically say, look at this awesome thing that was accomplished. And by the way, here's the blueprint to do it in your own teams. Then you can start to get a groundswell, right? But you need both things. You need top down, where you all as the leaders have to give your teams permission and probably push. You probably need both permission and top down goals where you say, look, I want you to do X. I want you to adopt this technology. I want you to think about how you use AI to go faster, maybe even set some targets on efficiency goals, right? Even if you don't know what they are, you say, I want you to set a 20% efficiency goal for next year.
Yep.
And your teams will tell you, I have no idea how to hit that. You go like, great, then let's go figure it out.
That's what we did together.
We did that, exactly. That's what I did to our teams. I think we had teams, and I said, let's go get a 20% efficiency goal. And they're like, well, I don't know how to measure it. I was like, great, let's define how we're going to measure it, and then let's go do it. And so you have the top-down goal, and then you want to make it exciting for teams. And then you find those use cases where it's just awesome. And that flywheel is what's special. And it's hard work, by the way. It's not like you do it in 3 weeks and they're like, wow, it just worked. Like, we're not done. We're not kind of completely, we're not even close to done, by the way, of rolling it out across Amazon, and of rolling, just imbuing, like putting AI into everything that we do. But it takes continued leadership push as well.
Very good there. Matt, my last question is going to be around vision. You joined the AWS about the time when AWS was formed, and the company has convinced people to go from Amazon as a bookseller to becoming a top cloud computing company.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are moving and evolving into an agentic world, autonomous systems here.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you confident that we can get to that point and still be leaders in that front?
Yeah. So I've always been I'm optimistic by nature, I will say. And if you harken back to when we were first starting out AWS, you're right. It was looking back on it, it was kind of a bizarre time. But we would actually, like, we had a little booth at a conference, kind of like this. We didn't have our own conference yet, and people would be like, "What is Amazon Web Services?" And we'd be like, "Well, we allow you to run compute and storage and things like that." And they'd be like, "Do you guys sell books? Like, I really don't understand." Like, and it was like no, we had to explain what cloud computing was. Actually, my mom was really worried because she's like, "What is cloud computing? That doesn't sound like a real thing." And so I had to convince her that it was a real thing first, and then and then I had to convince customers that it was a real thing. But mom was first, then customers, and then eventually it kind of, like, that part, like, that part solved itself eventually. And for now, I think, and part of where that benefit is what I've learned there is that when you feel convicted about the path that you're on, it's okay to be misunderstood for a little bit of time. And that's what Jeff Bezos used to have this saying, that you have to be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time when you feel convicted about the path that you're on. And so we were when we started AWS, right? There are a lot of people. There's a famous Business Week cover article where it was like Jeff on the cover, and they told, the headline was like, analysts wish that Amazon would just mind the store and stop with this cloud computing nonsense. And we were misunderstood for long periods of time while we worked and built the business, because we felt convicted that there was real value there was customer value there, that there was a huge business for us to go build. And we were right. In the AI space, 2 years ago, people are like, you guys aren't rushing out there with chatbot. Like, you're totally behind. Like, you guys are missing the boat. And we knew that we had invested in silicon. And we sat back and we said, look, all of our customers are going to want to put this technology into their real applications. We just didn't believe that it was going to be a chatbot. We really believed this was going to be a core technology that's going to transform businesses and companies and applications. And so we said, we're going to build a platform. And this platform is going to support lots of different models, because we don't think there's just going to be one OpenAI 3 model, or whatever the one was, GPT-3 at the time. Like, there's not just going to be one model. We already saw that there's lots of models. There's open models. There's Amazon models. We're going to build a whole bunch of these. And we're going to build a platform that allows you to integrate it easily into your data, to think about your compliance, to actually give you the flexibility to. We didn't kind of have all of the pieces in place, but we had this idea a year ago. So that was about 2 years ago, and people were like, "Okay, you guys are missing the boat." And we believed that we were building the right thing. And so then a year ago, I would say fewer people were asking us if we were totally missing the boat. They're like, "Okay, all right, I agree. You guys are building some really good stuff, but it still feels like maybe, there's some other people that have some great stuff out there." But I agree, like, Bedrock's pretty good, and I agree that the whole vision of multi-models, supporting multiple models and really lean in there is probably the right model. And we kept innovating, right? And we kept saying, great, we're going to innovate under the covers. We're still innovating at the chip level. We're still building our first models. And last year we launched our first Nova model, right? And then people were like, oh, okay, you are building models. Interesting. And we kept iterating on there and learning what customers want and building this platform. And now I think we see, as customers are moving workloads to production, that actually the vast majority of those are happening on AWS, because customers want to deploy their application, their AI and their inference where their applications are, where their data is, where they can feel secure about how that's working together, where they have a rich platform that's going to be able to allow them to build the right set of guardrails, pick the right sets of models, integrate their data, have the right customization features and the capabilities on top with the lowest cost and best performing infrastructure. And so this has been probably a 3-4 year journey that we've been on, and at least kind of 2 years in the public eye. And I think, I've seen the same thing happen, where I think now fewer and fewer people are like, what the hell are you guys doing? And it's more like, oh, good. That's actually where I want my enterprise deployments to happen, which is great. And we're okay with that. And because we have a long-term view about this business, where we deeply listen to what you all want. And this is, by the way, it's not like we're geniuses in thinking about this. It's because we actually just sit there and we listen to what you want. We listen to the problems that you're trying to solve, and our teams go back and they take that feedback seriously. So all of what you guys are doing, customer meetings this week and with our teams, thank you. Like, that is informing our next quarter, 6-month, 1 year, and 3 year out roadmaps. And so we really appreciate that feedback. It's incredibly valuable to us, and it's informing what we're going to be talking about on stage and reInvent 26 and 27 and 28. So it's super valuable, and we have that long-term view with customer focus in mind, which is why I think that we continue to be successful, and frankly, why I think we keep delivering such value to hopefully all you out there.
Well said, Matt. Thank you very much.